In February of 2023, Dan Foster and Jaron Williams, aged 49 and 27, were in the cafeteria at an Intel semiconductor facility in Chandler, Arizona. After the night shift employees had left, their co-worker Derrick Lamont Simmons entered the room with a baseball bat in hand. He approached Foster as he sat at a table and struck him multiple times in the head. Williams got up and tried to intervene but was hit in the back of the head with the same bat and collapsed. Simmons turned his attention back to Foster and continued striking him with a bat before switching to a hatchet and then stabbing him with a knife. The authorities were called and intercepted Simmons outside the facility as he was carrying 2 duffel bags. The man was in possession of several tools that weren't necessary for his job. Officers found Foster dead from blunt force trauma, while Williams was taken to a hospital with non-fatal injuries. Simmons was arrested on charges of first-degree murder and aggravated assault. Updates on the matter indicated that he was held at the Maricopa County Jail on a $1 million cash bond. The motive behind the man's workplace rampage remained unclear. Records indicated that the 50-year-old had a previous felony conviction for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Number 7. Clifford Currie. For about a year leading up to September of 2016, Army Lieutenant Katie Blanchard had worked alongside Clifford Currie in the Munson Army Health Center at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Currie, who was Blanchard's subordinate, had begun behaving in an aggressive and threatening manner towards her following a dispute in January of 2016. Blanchard reported him multiple times to her superiors, stated that she was afraid of him and asked to be accompanied by another staffer when working with him, but her requests were reportedly denied. On September the 7th, Currie walked into Blanchard's office with a plastic bottle containing gasoline. He doused the woman with the flammable liquid and set her on fire before attacking her with a straight-edge razor blade. He then grabbed a pair of scissors from the office to stab Blanchard and held her down by pressing his foot on her neck. A co-worker heard the woman's screams and walked in to find her on fire from the chest up. He pushed Currie away, and more military colleagues intervened to subdue him as the badly burnt Blanchard screamed at them, "I told you this would happen!" The woman, who was then 26 years old, suffered 3rd and 4th degree burns in addition to other injuries. She received treatment at an Army medical facility in San Antonio, Texas, and shared her progress with her family and friends on social media. Blanchard, who was left with scarring to her face and chest, later told a media outlet that she felt utterly let down by her superiors, as they'd failed to address her concerns regarding Currie. The latter was convicted of assault with attempt to commit murder in August of 2017. He was given the maximum possible sentence of 20 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Number 6. Angel Footman. Florida teacher Angel Footman was arrested in the spring of 2023 for holding Fight Club-style brawls in her classroom at Griffin Middle School in Tallahassee. While sitting at her desk, 23-year-old Footman reportedly gave instructions that included no screaming, no phones, and the bouts lasting 30 seconds. The teacher's disturbing activities were uncovered by school administrators who were shown videos of the fights. In the footage, Footman made no efforts to intervene and stop them. It also emerged that students were asked back for more and even pulled out of classes to take part in the brawls. Law enforcement was called and they questioned Footman, who reportedly denied orchestrating the fights, but admitted failing to report, call for help, or intervene when they broke out. She was taken into custody and charged with 4 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Number 5. Ken Rosato. A veteran New York City news anchor was fired from his position in the spring of 2023 after a hot mic caught him insulting his co-host. Ken Rosato had started with ABC New York in 2003 as a freelance reporter for its Eyewitness News show. A few years later, he was promoted to the anchor desk, where he remained as a co-host for This Morning, alongside Shirlene Allacott, Heather O'Rourke, and Sam Champion. 56-year-old Rosato wasn't on air when he made a comment about Allacott, which was picked up on an open mic. There was initial speculation that the man had used a racial slur, but his agent adamantly denied the rumor, and it eventually emerged that Rosato had actually called Allacott the C word. He was promptly terminated from his position in the aftermath. Number 4. Daniel Conway. British Army Corporal Daniel Conway was jailed for more than 7 years in the summer of 2023 for assaulting a colleague in Catterick, North Yorkshire. The unnamed female soldier had arranged to stay in Conway's room after a party celebrating her promotion. He asked to join her and the woman agreed, but reportedly made it clear that nothing was going to happen. After a night out, the inebriated pair returned to the Harrogate barracks and fell asleep. The female soldier reportedly woke up to Conway performing an act on her and wasn't sure where to go or what to do, telling him to stop before going back to sleep. She later awoke to what she believed was Conway forcing himself upon her. The woman jumped out of bed and went to the bathroom. Upon returning to the room, she found that the corporal was gone. She subsequently confronted Conway on WhatsApp and wrote, "You need to be more aware of what is wanted and what is not." The man apologized and replied affirmatively when asked by the victim if he'd worn protection. However, when the woman claimed that he'd abused her, Conway denied that he'd gone all the way in the act. The woman reported him to the authorities and upon being approached by officers, Conway told them, "I know why you're here. I didn't even sleep with her." DNA analysis found traces of his saliva on the female soldier's underwear, which, along with the message exchange, incriminated Conway. He was found guilty of abuse and assault by penetration at Bulford Military Court, Wiltshire, and sentenced to 7 years and 6 months in prison. Number 3. Bhaskar Rao. In 2020, during the coronavirus pandemic, Indian man Bhaskar Rao brutally beat a female co-worker for reminding him to wear a mask in the office. Rao, the deputy manager at the AP Tourism Hotel, charged Chakuri Usharan. He grabbed her by the hair and dragged her from her chair to the floor at their office in Dagamita in the city of Nellore. In the CCTV recorded attack, Rao then reached for a sharp item on a desk and began stabbing the woman in the face with it. An elderly man intervened and tried to stop Rao but was unable to do so and fell backwards on the floor with the victim's hair still in his grasp. Rao then armed himself with a wooden armrest that had broken off from Usharan's chair and forcefully struck the cowering woman several times in the head. Rao relented after other workers intervened and wrestled the wood rest out of his hand. He was arrested for assault and causing injuries using a weapon. Usharan suffered severe injuries as a result of Rao's onslaught, but wasn't reported as being in life-threatening condition. Number 2. Natalie Garcia. 24-year-old substitute teacher Natalie Garcia surrendered to police in Mesquite, Texas, in April of 2023 after she was charged with 4 counts of endangering a child. The teacher had been accused of organizing fights between her students at Kimbrough Middle School. She'd allowed and even encouraged 2 fights, one involving 2 boys and another between 2 girls. The daughter of a woman named Betty Martinez was in the classroom during the incidents and she secretly recorded them. Garcia was heard saying that she didn't want the fights on record and went as far as to instruct a student to monitor the door while they unfolded. Martinez's daughter showed her the videos, and the woman later told a media outlet, "My brain couldn't comprehend what was going on." She reported Garcia, who was consequently arrested and fired while an investigation was underway. If you missed our video on when completely losing it goes wrong a few months back, then we also have that one lined up for you still, right after number 1. Stay tuned if you'd like. Number 1. SHAUN Runyon. In the fall of 2021, SHAUN Runyon was part of a group of electrical contractors working at the Publix supermarket's construction site in Florida on behalf of J&B Electric based in Pennsylvania. 39-year-old Runyon shared a rental house in Davenport, Central Florida with several of his co-workers. At around 2 a.m. on October the 1st, Runyon got into an unspecified heated argument with his supervisor, 41-year-old Kevin Lanous. Runyon punched the man before leaving the construction site in the company truck after his half-brother, who owned the company, told him to return to Pennsylvania. Runyon parked the work vehicle at Tampa International Airport, rented a car and then drove to a Target where he purchased a baseball bat. Runyon returned to the Davenport home where 7 people were staying at the time. He entered the residence armed with the bat and his personal knife. The man went into Lanous's room and, according to an affidavit, started hitting him in the head and didn't stop until he saw brain matter as he moved through the home. Runyon entered several other rooms in which he beat a second co-worker to death and fatally stabbed a third. The victims were identified as Dulon Donnell and Gregory Dolezal, both in their 40s. Lanous survived long enough to be airlifted from the scene but later passed away in a hospital. Runyon had also targeted co-worker Albert Reed during the rampage, but only managed to non-fatally strike him in the shoulder and back as he fled. A few hours after the attack, Runyon turned up at a home in Lake Wells with his clothes covered in blood and told the homeowners that he'd been abused. The people urged him to go to the hospital, where he was ultimately taken into custody. He reportedly confessed, and Polk County law enforcement subsequently told the media, "We have no idea what outraged him so badly that more than 24 hours later that he would come back and make an attempt to kill every one of them." At the time of the killings, Runyon was a fugitive from justice and had an active warrant in Pennsylvania for charges that included strangulation, simple assault, and drug possession. Updates on his case indicated that he would be extradited to Pennsylvania for the legal proceedings related to the aforementioned charges, while in Florida he faced the death penalty. Number 6. Austin Harrouff. On the night of August the 15th of 2016, Florida couple John Stevens III and Michelle Mishkon were sitting in the garage of their Tequesta home with the door open when they were suddenly attacked by a passerby. 19-year-old Florida State University student Austin Harrouff stabbed the victims repeatedly with tools he found in the garage, as well as a pocket knife. A neighbor subsequently came over to help the couple but was also injured by the young man. When authorities arrived at the scene, they found Harrouff on top of Stevens, attempting to bite chunks out of his face and abdomen. An officer deployed his taser on the suspect, which did little to subdue him. It ultimately took 2 deputies using every bit of strength they had to wrestle Harrouff into custody. Law enforcement's immediate theory was that the unhinged college student had taken some sort of street drug, such as flakka, but that was refuted when his toxicology report came back clean. Investigators learned that on the night of the incident, Harrouff had been eating dinner at a restaurant with his father when he suddenly got up and left. He wandered into the street and proceeded to walk more than 3 miles before eventually happening upon the victims in their garage and launching his unprovoked attack. The young man's parents told the police he'd been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to his outburst, and also informed them that mental illness, including schizophrenia, ran in the family. During the case's court proceedings in November of 2022, a judge accepted Harrouff's plea of not guilty by reason of insanity to 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was subsequently moved to a mental health facility until medical professionals determined he is not a risk to society. Number 5. Jonathan Wesley Harris. In the early hours of August 22nd of 2018, former Playboy model Christina Carlin Craft met a man named Jonathan Wesley Harris, who'd agreed to sell her an ounce of cocaine for $1,200 in downtown Philadelphia. When the pair got to the 36-year-old woman's Ardmore apartment, they reportedly drank several bottles of wine and had consensual intercourse. Then, Harris flew into a rage when Carlin Craft refused to pay for the illegal substances he'd given her, leading to a violent altercation. The woman allegedly struck Harris over the head with a glass bottle, to which he retaliated by repeatedly slapping and punching her. When the model tried to run away, he tied her up on the bed. She subsequently asked if she could call her dad, but instead used the phone to dial 911, further angering Harris. While describing the incident to law enforcement, the man admitted to choking Carlin Craft until she stopped screaming, saying, "I panicked. I was scared. I didn't know what to do." Although he claimed to have believed the woman to still be alive, Harris fled out the apartment's back door and jumped from the balcony as she lay unresponsive in her bed. When emergency crews were sent to the scene, Carlin Craft was pronounced dead, having sustained several broken bones in her face as well as significant bruising. A medical examiner determined her official cause of death to have been strangulation and detected no illegal substances in her system. Harris was arrested and charged with a number of offenses, including murder, robbery, and theft. In court, the man's defense team conceded that the inculpatory evidence pointing to his involvement in the killing was undeniable. They did, however, attempt to convey Harris's impaired mental state, claiming he'd been out of his mind on ketamine at the time of the deadly altercation, which had caused him to snap. In the end, Harris was found guilty on all charges. For what prosecutors called a fit of demonic torture, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 4. Jason Jablonski. The police in Virginia Beach were called to the 1200 block of Edenham Court near the Chesapeake City line for a report of a violent altercation on the morning of March the 11th of 2022. Law enforcement found the body of 45-year-old Herbert Bryant inside. A preliminary investigation led detectives to ID a Navy sailor named Jason Jablonski as their first suspect. According to Navy records, 41-year-old Jablonski was a gunner's mate first class, stationed at Naval Station Norfolk at the time of the incident. Investigators determined that the sailor had gotten into a heated argument with Bryant that eventually morphed into a physical fight, although the nature of their disagreement wasn't immediately made clear. Jablonski was said to have been on a crack bender at the time, which contributed to his erratic and violent behavior. At some point during the fight, the suspect allegedly struck Bryant in the face with a dumbbell, which he then pressed down on the victim's neck until he stopped moving. Jablonski was arrested on a charge of second-degree murder, while the police also identified an accomplice named Heather Totti, aged 35. The latter was charged with accessory to murder after the fact, having witnessed the deadly altercation, after which she allegedly helped move the victim's body and clean up the crime scene. Both suspects were denied bond after being taken into custody. In October of 2022, Jablonski's legal team proposed a guilty plea of voluntary manslaughter, but the judge ruled that the plea wouldn't be accepted or denied until January of 2023. Number 3. Coweta County car crash. In the early morning hours of June the 30th of 2022, an errant vehicle traveling at speeds far exceeding the posted limit careened off the road and crashed into a house, killing a woman inside. The incident occurred on Johnson Road in Senoia, Georgia, where Annette Rush lived and was an active member of the community, especially at her local church. On the morning in question, a Coweta County Sheriff's deputy attempted to pull over a car that failed to dim its lights. The traffic stop was initiated at about 2:30 a.m. on Gordon Road in Senoia. Rather than cooperate with law enforcement, however, the motorist sped off, reportedly reaching 130 miles per hour during the ensuing pursuit. The deputy eventually lost track of the car before encountering a commotion on the 900 block of Johnson Road. The driver who'd fled the traffic stop had veered off course after reaching a curve in the road. The vehicle's wayward trajectory ultimately landed it in the path leading directly to Annette Rush's home. The car smashed through the front porch and knocked out the main electrical breaker before barreling into one of the duplex's bedrooms where Rush was sleeping. Although the woman was left critically injured after being trapped beneath rubble, her family initially believed she was going to be okay, as she reportedly gave them a thumbs up while being placed in an ambulance. From there, she was taken to the hospital for treatment, but her condition only worsened. Eventually, doctors had no choice but to cease their efforts and pronounce her dead. The victim's husband had been on the couch at the time of the accident and was left unharmed. The couple's 28-year-old son, Leonard, was hospitalized with a shoulder injury but ultimately made it out with his life. The driver responsible for Rush's death was described as a boy not yet of legal driving age. He was taken into custody and held at a youth detention center pending his case's legal proceedings. Number 2. Henry Hammond. In May of 2019, Australian woman Courtney Heron was brutally beaten to death with a tree branch by a homeless man in the throes of a schizophrenic relapse. The 25-year-old's body was found hidden beneath branches in Melbourne's Royal Park. A witness who was sleeping in the park at the time of the fatal altercation reported hearing Heron say, "Are you going to kill me?" as she and Henry Hammond were walking nearby. The man subsequently picked up a tree branch and started bashing her over the head with it. He was so intense he was grunting. It went on for 50 minutes, said the eyewitness, who testified in court during the case's ensuing trial. After the victim was dead, Hammond bound her legs together and attempted to hide the body before making off with her phone and wallet. Hours earlier, after they just met, Heron had reportedly treated Hammond to a meal before the pair partook of crystal meth together and went for a walk in the park. When law enforcement caught up with the suspect the following day, he claimed to have attacked Heron because he recognized her from a past life and that she'd buried his wife alive. His delusional thinking reportedly stemmed from his relapsing schizophrenia, which he'd been suffering from since 2017. In March of 2021, Victoria's Supreme Court spared Hammond any prison time for Heron's slaying. He was instead committed to a high-security mental health clinic in Fairfield for 25 years, having been found not guilty of murder due to mental impairment. Number 1. Hemi Neumann. Georgia man Rusty Snyderman was gunned down after dropping his son off at a Dunwoody daycare on November the 18th of 2010. A few months later, investigators identified a man by the name of Hemi Neumann, who supervised Snyderman's wife at GE Energy as a suspect. In January of 2011, Neumann was taken into custody on suspicion of committing the murder, allegedly because he and the victim's wife, Andrea, were having an affair. During the ensuing legal proceedings, Neumann maintained that he was mentally unstable and that it was his decline in mental health that led to him carrying out the deadly shooting. In March of 2012, the jury accepted this argument, ruling that he was guilty but mentally ill. He was subsequently given a life sentence. 5 months later, Andrea Snyderman was issued a criminal indictment alleging her involvement in her husband's killing. Among the charges levied against the woman were malice murder, attempted murder, racketeering, and insurance fraud. The murder charge was eventually dismissed, but in August of 2013, Andrea was convicted of 9 felony counts and was consequently sentenced to 5 years in prison. 2 years later, Neumann's murder conviction was reversed by Georgia Supreme Court, which cited a violation of attorney-client privilege in support of its decision. The man was awarded a new trial, which in August of 2016 concluded with him being found guilty and once again receiving a life prison sentence. Although Neumann subsequently sought a third trial, the Supreme Court unanimously upheld his second conviction in March of 2021. Thanks for watching. Would you rather work for minimum wage and make your own hours, or work 9 to 5 in an office for double the pay? Let us know in the comments section below.